How do you know who you are if you don't know where you came from? How can you go confidently into the future if you don't know who you are? That's the idea behind the African principle known as Sankofa. We must look back in order to go forward. And what is true for an individual is true for an entire community. The Black community of Delaware County, Ohio has not had its history recorded on paper or in any other way until now. The Delaware County Historical Society and the Delaware African American Heritage Council are determined to address that omission. In partnership, we have worked on an oral history project focused on those African Americans who grew up in Delaware in the 1950s and 1960s. In this video, you will meet some of those elders who graciously shared their memories of growing up in a nearly all-white town. Only short segments of their stories are told here. The rest of their recorded recollections will be available through the Historical Society. The video you will see is only the beginning of a larger effort to capture, preserve, and share stories of the Black experience in this county. These stories will provide a needed perspective on times past, but also on the challenges currently faced. We hope you find this enlightening.
The time that you grew up before you went off to college, and what was the second ward like back then?
Well, the main thing I noticed that all the Blacks lived in the South End. And of course, you have Ohio Westland on one border, and you have Hughes Keener and the industrial areas on the other. And all Blacks, with the exception of a few, lived in the same area. And that was probably the main memory I have about it at that time. But that was good because you really had a sense of community. Although it was integrated with Blacks and whites, you knew everybody. If I walked down the street this way, I knew them. If I walked up the street that way, I knew them. And so it was kind of more of a one big community family at that time.
How did your teachers treat you? Any differently than?
No, I can't say that they did. They were all lovely teachers. Mrs. Montgomery taught the special ed.
She was my first grade teacher.
Yeah. So they always tried to inspire us to do the best we can. And they were true teachers. And they did look at us, you know, we were children. We didn't have any color. We were children. And it didn't matter.
Now, were most of your teachers Caucasians or?
All of them were Caucasian.
All of them?
I never had a teacher of color until I went back to school at Hayes. And I had, what's her name?
Miss Hatch?
Miss Hatch. And in order for me to graduate, I had to take Problems of Democracy. So I had her. And I went back and I had Mrs. Hearns again.
I had Miss Hearns too.
Yeah. And Herbie Cole, he went back to school because he had dropped out in the 11th grade, and we were in Mrs. Hearns' class together. And she was so tickled to see us there because we called her the Johnny Green Giant.
Yeah.
A little older, think about and share some of your experiences in middle and high school.
Well, as I got older, and I was going to explain a little bit ago that I was sitting down with my parents watching the news when I was probably 8, 9 years old, and we're watching TV and the news, and noticed that there were police officers and firemen, and they were sicking dogs on people. This was during the civil rights clashes down in Alabama and down in the South. And I couldn't understand why the police, because we were always taught that the police were our friends, and it was a safe person. And they explained to me that they're trying to stop these people from voting, and they don't want them to have the rights. And they were sicking dogs and hoses on elderly people, children, and everything else. So that kind of blew me away then, and that's when I really started getting an idea that things were different in the world. There were things that we didn't do, a lot of things that we didn't miss because we didn't know was available to us, that we weren't allowed to. Going to the movie theater, they had kiddie shows in the summertime. They were free kiddie shows, you get tickets and you go in and out. And we were always led upstairs to the balcony, you know. And I started to understand what that was about. And we didn't have total access of the public swimming pool, you know. A lot of us learned to swim in the quarry over there on Stratford Road, you know. Those are the kind of things, you know. And then as we got into middle school and high school, there was a lot of differences in the way things were done there. Punishments were meted out differently. You know, you see two kids get in a fight and one of them gets paddled and the other one doesn't. And, you know, it's just differences like that. And as I got into high school, we noticed a lot of the things that were going on. We didn't have library books that told us about our history, you know. There were different things that were going on. For instance, we used to have, when our bus came through to pick us up in the South End, it would go around through other white areas, and then it would come to pick us up. And usually there weren't very many seats left, so a lot of us we were left standing, you know, to go to school. And we asked, well, why can't we get you know, a bus, you know, to come through so that, you know, we can sit down on the bus on the way to school. And, you know, they ended up putting, because things got out of hand, people were pushing and shoving for seats, and so they ended up putting, I guess it was a counselor or somebody on the bus, you know, to try to keep the order on the bus. You know, so we decided, you know, we're not going to ride the bus. So all of us from the South End, every morning we would gather together and then we would walk out to the high school. You know, so when we got to the high school, then we'd all gather around the flag and, you know, and say our bit, and then we go in. And as you know, Delaware Hayes is all glass, so everybody in the school was looking out and watching, you know, us as we walk in and walk out. And that went on for a while, and then finally we went one morning, and the assistant principal, and like I said, I'm hesitant about naming names here for this, he locked the doors to the school, and he wouldn't let us in. So that set off a firestorm, you know. Now we called our parents, and a whole lot of our parents came up there, and they were just raising the dickens because, you know, they locked the school, the public school. And we also had students from Ohio Wesleyan University that we, you know, met with a lot, and they had the SUBA, the Student Union of Black Awareness. Well, they helped us to form an organization which we called UMOJA, which is Swahili for unity. And we put a list of demands together to present to the school. And that included, as I said, about literature in the library. We asked that we, you know, have a bus sent to us that we didn't have to stand up all the way to school. Fairness and discipline and meeting out discipline. Some of the other things that we asked for. And like I said, we sat down with our parents and with the school administration, and, you know, showed them our demands. Well, they ended up trying to meet some of our demands, but I don't think, you know, we still got all the things that we really needed to have.
Special ninth grade basketball team, football team, and golf team, and I was always fairly active in athletics, and I was athletic, and but when it came to organized sports, that the school found it wasn't. There was very, very few black people I'm not saying there weren't any, but they limited the amount of participation by the blacks in school activities. So basketball was one of my favorite sports, and I excelled at it pretty well. In intramural sports and summer sports. Well, and I was recognized as a very good athlete. However, I always got cut from the basketball team, and so unfortunately, when those things happen to you, you get an attitude. When you feel like you have been unjustly able to participate, you would ask the coaches. I would ask the coach. I said, "Well, I often shine, in practice and recess and intramural sports. Why am I being cut from the team?" And I'll never forget. I was a sophomore in high school, and he told me that I can't call the name of it, but there's a group of people that kind of monitored the sports, adults that would monitor the sports, and who all would be on the team and who would be on the team, and the boosters. The boosters would not okay him to have any more. The coach actually told me the boosters would not allow him to have no more than 2 black kids on the basketball team, and I wasn't one of them. And he told me, he said, "You're actually better than a lot of the other teams, the other players on the team, but I can only bring 2 onto the team, and you're not one."
Teachers, and they encouraged you. Do you think that they treated you any differently than the white children in the class?
Not at Woodward, because although South End has always been majority white, although people think of it as the black neighborhood, it's never been a black neighborhood majority. Elementary school, because we were more one-on-one. In high school, I had a couple of teachers that I had doubts about, but in terms of grades and being called on in class, the only really negative experience I had was with the guidance counselor at the time.
Can you explain a
Yes.
little bit about what?
I'll never forget him as long as I live, because he had done this to other black students. A cousin went to graduate from Miami University in 54 or 55. Went to visit her as a little girl, fell in love with the campus, and that's where I determined I was going to school. I wasn't applying anywhere else. He didn't send my application in. When my mother asking, she saw him in some public function. We had contacted Miami, they hadn't received an application. Why didn't you send her application in? Oh, I thought she'd be more comfortable at Wilberforce. My mother just went ballistic. No, she wouldn't be more comfortable at Wilberforce. He sent the application in. Of course, I was accepted. And later on, I realized there were a lot of white kids who were applying that weren't being accepted. And he knew that I would be accepted, and this is all before affirmative action, and that was probably the most hurtful thing that happened. But I'm glad my mother was on top of it. This is the same guidance counselor who told 2 of your cousins, one who's now a lawyer and the other's a surgeon, that they should find something to do with their hands.
The stories told by these participants and others reveal what growing up black in Delaware was like. Their words will be secured in the Delaware County Historical Society's archive for anyone to review now and in the future. In keeping with the principle of Sankofa, they allow us to look back so we can appreciate the present and move forward. If you have recollections you want to share, the Growing Up Black in Delaware Oral History Project invites you to participate. If you're interested, call 740-369-3831 and speak with Donna Meyer, the Historical Society Executive Director.